Friends, welcome to another lecture in series of PHP, a complete guide for beginners. In this episode, we will talk about working with forms in PHP. Initially, we will discuss all the theoretical aspects of it, and then we will go to our mock project where we will create a form and process it using PHP. As you know that in a PHP file, CSS and HTML are part of that. PHP script as such cannot display anything. It has to send the output back to browser in a HTML form so that the browser, Chrome, Firefox or Safari can interpret what is being sent and display to the end user or client. Form tag is a special tag in HTML which is used to receive data or collect the data from the user, from the end user, and form tag is used to then send that data to the server. For in the form tag in HTML, we have three different attributes which we will discuss. The first attribute in form tag is action. Action attribute specifies when the form is submitted, it should go to which page or which PHP script. It could go to a HTML page as well. It could go to a PHP page as well. As we are learning PHP today, our initial PHP file will load a form, HTML form, and we will send it via action tag to another PHP page for processing of that data. Method attribute in a form tag specifies how the data is sent back to the server. There are two ways, get or post. When we use method as get, the data is sent back via URL. So the URL for the target page, which is defined in the action attribute, the data also is sent back along with the URL. When we use post as a method for sending back the data, it is sent in the HTTP request or HTTPS request. The data is not visible in the URL. So when you send data via post, it is more secure than sending it via get. Next is the target attribute in form tag. Target attribute specifies when this URL action is performed, whether it should open in the same tab where the original requesting page is, or it should open in a new tab. Underscore self value will make it open in the same tab. If you make it underscore blank, it will ask it to open in a brand new tab. Then we have labels and input tags for defining our forms. Let's discuss about input tag first. Input tags are the tags where you can accept different kinds of data using different kind of input mediums like a text box or a text editor or a radio button where you can select one value from 2 or 3 or 4 different values, or a checkbox where you can select a multiple values for a particular variable. And last but not the least, input type is submit. You will have always a button which you click, and then all the data which you collect in the form, which is submitted to the URL which you specify in the action attribute of form tag using the get or post method. Here I have enumerated difference between get versus post methods of sending the data. Get, as I mentioned, uses a URL to send the data using name and value pairs, name of every input tag and the value of that input tag, what the client has given in the form while filling the form. It has a limit of 2048 characters. So if your data is an editor or it's a big message, get method will not work and you have to rely on post. Since it is transporting data with the URL, so it is visible. So if you are working on a sensitive piece of information, get method is not advisable and one should go with post. Get is useful in the scenarios where user wants to bookmark the URLs, as it has that additional information. Post is more secure as no data is displayed in URL. Post form submissions cannot be bookmarked. Here are various input tags. We saw earlier the text input type as text. Then there could be input type as reset. This again displays a button. When you click that button, all the values which are entered in the form are reset, are cleared from the interface. Text box. So when you have multiple lines of text input, then we will utilize text area input tag. Select is for a drop down list. So select tag is used for creating a drop down list. If you want user to have ability to select multiple options as a response to the select tag or your drop down list, then you also specify the multiple attribute here. If you don't specify multiple attribute here, then user will only be able to select one option from the various options. So these are all of the input tags which you can have potentially in a HTML form. Then there are some super global variables in PHP, like when you send using get method a form and it goes to the action attribute or the page which is specified in the action attribute, it is going as name and value pairs that can be accessed via $_get super global variable as an associative array. So you can always access all the data in the URL which is sent from the form using $_get super variable. Similarly, if you are using post as sending data, then $_post array variable will be utilized to access the data by the PHP script. As we move forward, I will discuss about more super global variables. For now, get and post are where we need to focus upon. Let's now move on to some PHP coding and create a form and process that form. In our web root directory htdocs, for this exercise, let's create a folder form handling, and inside that folder let's make index.php our starting file. So as you can see in index.php, I have created a skeleton of HTML. I have used here a style sheet as well, which we will touch upon a little bit later. In our PHP form handling, this is our basic HTML skeleton, which you can see I have. Let me start creating a form tag. In form tag, as you know, we need to have certain attributes. The first one is action. So in our case, let us try to process the form information and send it to another PHP file, and we'll name it as process.php. The method which we will use for sending, we will use get method. We will do this for post method as well, but let's start with get method and then I can show you the difference between both. And then target, we want to open it within the same tab where form, original form is there. So target we will put as self. Inside form tag, let's have a label tag for first name, closing the label tag. So label, as the name suggests, it's just a label for any field which we use in forms. Labels serve a very specific purpose. If you don't give a label, still your form will work and you can fill in the fields and the data will be collected and sent back to the action page. However, having a label helps for screen reader softwares to voice out the labels for visually challenged people, and also labels help to click. For example, if you are having an input type as a radio, it's very difficult to take your mouse cursor to a specific circle, radio circle, and then click it. If you have a label, then you can always click on the label and the radio will be selected. Well, let's define the input field for this label. Input type is text. Name is first name. ID is first name. value, let's give it as blank now. So we have defined a label and we have defined a input type of text. In our form, we are planning to have 3 fields: first name, last name, and favorite flower. So we want to ask user, what is their favorite flower by utilizing a radio button. So it will be first name, last name, which are 2 text fields, and then a radio button. And then fourth element would be a submit button to send this data to our PHP backend script. So first name, I copy this, and then let's make it as last name. We want to have a radio input type. In this case will be radio. Name will be flower and ID will be rose. Value will be rose. So this is one possible criteria in radio button. The next flower will be daffodil. Value will be daffodil. We have defined 2 radio buttons. In radio buttons, you want to show the options first, and then label generally will come towards the end. So let's now define the label for flower, your favorite flower. We have defined successfully 2 text inputs for first name, last name, 1 radio input with 2 options for flower. Options are rose and daffodil, and then input submit button. Input type is submit. Name is submit, and value is submit as well. This pretty much defines our form. You must have a question that why for radio we are having 2 different options. Their name is however same. This is because in radio the value or the input structure is 1 radio button. You want to send 1 value back, and all of these are tied together with this name. Name is flower. When you select either rose or daffodil, the value of rose, the one which you select, or daffodil, if you select daffodil, will be sent back to the server. ID specifies for client side scripting, like JavaScript kind of languages. You want to pinpointedly talk about or do some operation on a field, then this ID comes handy. That's the reason I have assigned ID as rose here. So ID is unique for each and every element in our form. If you see, name of the radio is flower. However, ID I have used here rose and daffodil, because if I use ID as flower, then for both of these it will not be unique. In first name and in last name we didn't have that problem, because first name is unique to this particular field and last name is unique for this field. So IDs could have been first name and last name. However, for radio we cannot use name of the radio, which is flower, as our ID. So we use rose and daffodil, the values, as ID. Let's try to save this and go to our browser. We created a folder in our web roots. The folder name was form handling. So if I click there and I see index.php, process.php, and a mains.css, which is a CSS file for styling, that it really helps for front-end presentation of a HTML file in a big way. CSS is a lifesaver. We will save for another video where we can discuss about CSS. Our folder name is form handling. So how it works is localhost form handling. So it gives us our form: first name, last name, your favorite flower. The styling is coming from the CSS. Here we see that we missed to provide labels for the radios. So let's go back to our file, and when we specify type as radio, let's specify rose daffodil, save it. So now we see rose and daffodil, and your favorite flower, label what we have. Let's place it before. I think in this case, instead of last, let's display before and see whether it's more readable. So yeah, let's keep it like that. We have successfully defined a form. This form, when we click on submit, should take us to process.php using get method, and it should open in the same tab. Let's try to enter. It takes us to process.php. However, in our process.php, there is nothing right now. We are shown a blank screen. In the top in URL, I want to highlight to you that you see here the URL is now process.php. Here all the values which you see after equal to are nothing but the inputs which are collected by the form from the user. And on the left of equal to signs are the keys or the names of all the various input text fields, input radio field in our case, and a submit field. So we really had 4 fields: first name, last name, flower, and submit. Values of those fields are the values which user has entered or keyed in the form. And the last submit button had a value submit. If you remember in our form, if I go to index.php, the value of submit is submit. Let's put some handling in process.php to display these values. First, let's check if is set request submit echo full name is first name. So full name is first name, and we concatenate it with a blank followed by the last name. And let's have couple of break tags. Your favorite flower is. We are simply trying to display the values which are returned by the client in the form which we defined just now. So the first thing what we try to do here is establish that really the submit button has been pressed using PHP built-in function is set. I typed it other way around, so it should be $_request. We try to see whether the underscore request super global array is set. The submit value is there indeed in the super global array. If it is there, then we are trying to display full name by utilizing our super global array underscore get and passing the argument as the key first name, which is coming from the form which we defined, and again utilizing super global variable get and passing the key as last name, joining these two separated by a blank and displaying it in the screen. Your favorite flower is again utilizing the same variable. So underscore get is nothing but an associative array of all the name and value pairs, all the key and value pairs which are passed in the URL back to the server. Let me go back to form handling. Undefined constant br, so that is our mistake. I utilize br here, but we never defined it. Define break tag. Let's try to refresh this. So full name is Mudit Mehta, your favorite flower is daffodil. If I try to fill 2 fields and then leave the radio and say submit, so I see full name is Mudit Mehta and undefined index on line 13 in process.php. So here what is happening is that we are trying to submit the form, but this underscore get flower is not initialized, then we are trying to print it using this statement. We should also try to check whether these fields are indeed assigned or they are not empty, and then only we should display these values. When we checked whether submit is pressed and all these three variables are not empty, then only we want to display our final output. Let's go back to our initial form and check how it is doing now. Yeah, so it's all good. Now next step, what we want to do is add a handling. If first name is blank or last name is blank or radio is not selected, we want to say to the user that this is not done. So let's try to see how we can achieve that. Let's go to our process.php and we say if is set submit if empty dollar underscore get first name echo first name cannot be left blank. We are checking all three variables, whether in the associative array which is returned as part of URL using the get method, we are checking whether they are empty or not. If they are empty, we are printing that it cannot be left blank. If last name cannot be left blank, choice of flower need to be made. We see here once the errors are displayed, we want user to see the form. For that, what we do is if it is submitted, we display finally the values if all three values are submitted. Otherwise, what we can simply do is include our file index.php here. So if I refresh, we see the errors. Like if we say Mudit Mehta, but we don't assign the radio, we should see only one error. If I only assign last name, I should see two errors. We are reaching there slowly. Another thing which I want to point out is that if I put Mudit and then I leave these two blank and then I submit, this is wiped out. So let's handle this one first, where in our index.php we will initialize here variable values dollar first name value is dollar last name value dollar flower value is blank. So in PHP, you can assign multiple variables with a single value like this. So we have initialized all three variables as blank. What we have done here is we have checked whether submit button is pressed. If it is pressed and if the first name, last name or flower is set, then we have stored the value of that input in a variable. First name val, last name val or flower val. If it is not set, then we have initialized the value as blank, which is our original state when we started our form. So this code will ensure that all our values are retained on screen. Now we have stored these in these three variables. When form errors are returned on screen, we want to now ensure that the values for these inputs is assigned or it is retained the value which you had filled earlier. In this first name field, To do that, we do a small PHP handling, last name, same concept, last name value, and for flower we need to do a little bit differently. Start a PHP tag. If flower value is equal to rows, we echo selected. In radios, we need to specify an attribute selected if we want to select a particular radio. Since in radio we have different values for different combinations, so we need to select that the value which we have retained or which we have stored in the variable coming back from the server, what value it has. It has rows or daffodil, and based on that we select the value which it has. Then we select the attribute. We use the attribute selected to highlight that particular radio button. Do the same for daffodil. In this case, we just want to replace this with daffodil. This should help us to retain the values. And let me try to come back to our 0 position and say Mudit, submit. Last name cannot be left blank. Choice of flower need to be made. However, Mudit is retained in our fill-in. Let's do Mehta and remove the first field. Mehta is retained and first name cannot be blank. Choice of flower need to be made. Let's select daffodil. First name cannot be left blank. However, here daffodil is not selected. Okay, so this is checked. So it's not selected. This is checked. It should work now. First name cannot be left blank, but my radio also, when I submit, it is retained. If I enter first name, remove this, it is perfectly retained. When I put all the inputs, all 3 inputs, it is showing me the output. Let me give a link here to go back. In process.php, we want to give a link to go back to the main form when all is good. So when all these values are displayed, I want to give an anchor tag. So this is successfully defining a anchor tag. Let us give a break here. So when we click, it clears all the values. Since in our index.php we are initializing all the values as blank when we initially come, and it is not coming from submit. If it is coming from submit, it is picking up values from the URL, so retaining the values, and like that. Now what we want to do is, if we put input and we say submit, the errors are displayed here. We want to display the errors a little bit more elegantly within these fields. So for that we will utilize something called span tag. Since we want to display errors more elegantly and not like here, we will utilize and display the errors in line with all these fields. So in our first name, where we had label and then input, let us define a span tag. Style is color is red. Close the span tag. Within the span tag, we want to display something. So our errors, rather than displaying in process.php right at the top, how you saw here, we want to show them inline in our index.php. So for that, what we need to do is in process.php, where we are generating the errors, let us store these errors in variables. First name error, last name error, and flower error. Rather than displaying it in process.php, we have just saved those errors in 3 variables. Let us initialize these 3 variables as blank. That way, when we go to our index.php in our span tag, we just want to echo the errors. Echo if is set $first name error, then we display first name error. So let's take this and use it for our last name, and same scenario we will do for our radio. We will use our flower error variable, save it. If I make first name and flower, it just shows me last name cannot be left blank. If I give last name and don't give the first name, then it gives me this. It is working how I'm expecting it to be, and effectively we are showing errors in a very dignified way. If all 3 we are adding, we are inputting, and then we say submit, it shows us and brings us there. If nothing we specify, we submit, it gives us this one. Let me bring it down. Just put a break tag here, save it. This is how we successfully do, using get method, a form creation, submission to the server, and then you can process howsoever you want on the data which you collect from the client. Since we are using get, we are having all the key value pairs coming back to us as a URL to the server, and the server script process.php in our case is processing on those inputs and displaying it, or finding errors in the input and giving those errors back to the client. We utilized get method for this. Another thing which I want to mention to you is that request. What is request? So request is an associative array, absolutely same as get. Request is a copy of get, however it has certain other values as well. So in request, I am trying to check submit, whether submit is clicked or not. I could very well replace this request with get, still it will work. I wanted to utilize request here as I wanted to show you that underscore request associative array will hold values absolutely same as underscore get or underscore post. So now if I want to use post method, what we really need to do is replace get with post. So wherever we have get, we have to replace it with post, and in our process.php, same concept. Wherever get is there, we need to replace it with post. We save it. So now when you see this, our method is post. Target is changed to tar post. So target, I hope there is no other places where it did like this. So let's try to go back to our form. So here Mudit, last name cannot be left blank with the perfect. So everything is working good. Now let me select all 3 values, and if you notice here, the URL is absolutely clean. It has no reference to key and value pairs from the form data what we had. That's the difference between get and post. Get utilizes the URL to send back the value to the server, which are retrieved in the server by the PHP script using associative array called _get, how we did in our code today. If we utilize post method, the data is still returned back to the server, however, not in the URL. It is in the request itself. So it's more secure, not visible to the end user, and you retrieve the data in PHP script utilizing associative array, but this time this array name will be _post. So in our process.php, if you see, we have utilized _post to check on the values and display the values in our output. So that's the difference between post and get. And as you saw, we really didn't change anything as far as the treatment is concerned. We just replaced get references with post. So instead of using _get superglobal variable, we started using _post superglobal variable to access the elements. In our form tag in HTML, we established method as post rather than get to achieve the same effect. And as I mentioned to you, _request, this is another associative array which is absolutely same as the values what you saw in post or get. In both situations, I never changed this. That tells us that the value of submit is indeed there in _request in both ways, when we utilized get as method for posting, or we utilize post as method for submitting values. In both cases, _request was a copy of those associative arrays, and it had value of submit. So if I change this to post also, it will work. Hope you find this helpful. I'll see you now in the next lecture. We will try to understand about regular expressions, and we will carry forward our understanding of PHP form validation using regular expressions. So see you there. Thank you.